Hi there. Previously, I showed you a video on how to draw the human figure. This time, I'm going to show you a video on how to draw poses. There are 8 different poses that I'm going to show you. This is not a tutorial on how to draw it, but it is going to show the step-by-step process. Because a lot of times when I view tutorials or read different books on drawing, I don't feel there's really a step process on how to do it. They expect you to know too much. With that said, I'm going to walk you through a step-by-step process of 8 different poses. Different shapes can represent parts of the human figure. These are the 3 shapes I use before drawing any figure or any pose: the head, torso, and pelvis. Then I map out where I want the arms, legs, and neck to stick out, because in more complex poses, you're going to need to know those. Then I use lines for arms and legs, or for more complex examples, use just the circles for the joints. Because if an arm is sticking right at you, you won't be able to draw a line, so in that case, you could just draw a giant circle for the hand. With that said, I'm going to walk you through a step-by-step process of 8 different poses. The first one is a neutral standing pose. So the first thing I do is draw a line. This is the action line, or the line of force, which is indicating the direction the figure is leaning. Now in the middle, I add another line for the hip line, and half the distance on top is another line for the shoulder line. And now I put in the head, torso, and pelvis, the 3 body parts I mentioned earlier. And now I put the body connections and put a little bit of the jawline. Now I map out where the figure is looking, and I map out what is the front of the head and what is the front of the torso and pelvis. And now I add lines. Then I add joints, but the joints are also the width of the flesh. And then I connect the dots. I flesh it out, and that's how I make a regular standing pose. The next one is aerial view 1. So there are going to be 2 aerial view shots. So again, I start off by making a line, and this time when I add the lines for the hip line and shoulder line, they're in separate spots here. So I made a head, and now see here on the top of the torso, that line is leveled with the top of the torso, but you can't see it because it's hiding behind the head. And with aerial view shots, those shapes, the head, torso, and pelvis, would have to be overlapping now. And here there's the pelvis. You see it, the pelvis is hiding behind the torso, and that middle line would be the top of the pelvis, which is hiding behind the torso. Now add the connections and the jawline. Now I mapped out the front of the figure. And now these are the joints. I didn't do lines this time because the lines would be shorter, and with the joints, I'm just indicating how far I want the lines to stick out. So I did shapes instead. And then connect the dots. And now this is aerial view 2. So again, I made a line, and this time the aerial view shot, the figure is going to be tilting on an angle. There is my shoulder line and hip line. And here, the top of the torso again is level with that upper line cutting through, which means the pelvis, top of the pelvis, would be level to that middle line cutting through. And then make my connections and the jawline. And here, this time the center of the face is tilted away. So the line that's cutting through would not be in the middle. It's indicating which way the figure is facing. And I made different shapes now for the joints, and then connect the dots. Now this time it's going to be a worm's eye view. This time we're going to be looking up at the figure. So make a line, and this time the shoulder line and hip line are going to be way up high. So looking up, the first thing you would see is the pelvis, and then the torso, and then the head. And now I made connections, the center of the figure. And again, I didn't make lines, I just made joints. And there you go, I connect the dots. Now, worm's eye view 2. This time the figure is going to be leaning at an angle. So there's the line of force. The shoulder line and hip line are up high again. Pelvis is the first thing you would see. Then the torso, then the head. The connections, the center of the figure. Not the center of the shape, but the center of the figure. And now notice how this time the shapes at the bottom of the figure are larger than the ones on top because you're looking up at the figure. So the shapes would be different sizes then for perspective. This time, jumping into action. Now that you know both aerial view and worm's eye view, we're going to look into more gesture now. Now look at this. The shoulder line is tilting down and the hip line tilting sideways. So this is going to be a little different now. So first I made the head, and then I made the torso like that, and then the pelvis like that. So right now it probably doesn't look accurate. Well, once I make the connections, you might be able to see it better. So those circles on the torso are the shoulder points. So that part of the torso is the back of the figure, but that pelvis is the front of the figure, and that is why the body connections are important role in figure drawing. And so I drew the center lines again, and this time I made lines for the arms and legs. Made the joints, and then connect the dots. Now this time the figure is going to be running, but we're going to be looking up at the figure while they're running. So this is the action line, and I said that I want both the shoulder line and hip line to be tilting down, and the head is overlapping a little to indicate you're looking up at the figure. Made the body connections and jawline. Now right now it looks like the head is looking out, but after I draw this, now you can tell that the figure is looking behind you. You know, mapping out comes handy like that. There we go, we connected the dots. This time the figure will be sitting. And this is the last pose now. So made the line, the shoulder line and hip line. But this time the hip line is very low on the line, which indicates that the pelvis would be on the bottom. And with the jawline and placement of the body connections, I said that the figure is tilting to our right, not the figure's left, but our right. There is the center of the torso and head, and this is the how I said I want the arms and legs to be positioned. But now look at that. Look at the figure's right arm. I didn't make a line like I did with other arm and legs. I said, okay, the hand is going to be closest to the viewer, so I'm not going to be making a line. Otherwise, the line would be too short. So when I make shapes larger, it's indicating that that joint is closer to the viewer. Because sometimes in foreshortening views, you can't always draw a line. That's when you have shapes be larger. And there are extra joints. And then connect the dots. So I hope this video was helpful and gave you a good understanding on how to make poses. Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching.